Welcome to another deep dive. And you have brought in some really fascinating stuff for us to look at this time.
Yeah, this is pretty cool.
It is.
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking at this book called Miro's Dream. And this is a book full of art and poetry, and it's inspired by Joan Miró.
Yeah, and what's really kind of interesting is we have, not just the book, but we have these descriptions of like the individual images.
Yeah.
It's like we're peering into, the artist's process as they went along.
It's almost like having E.J. Gold, who is the artist, sitting right here with us being like, and here's what I was thinking when I made this one.
Right, exactly.
And we also have excerpts from the book itself. So we can kind of get a feel for this whole dreamlike narrative it creates.
Yeah, and the fact that this all ties back to Miro, who, a giant of the surrealist movement, it just adds another layer of complexity, I think. So I'm really curious to see how these pieces fit together.
Absolutely. So let's dive in. So first things first, Miro's Dream is volume 1 of the Gateways Fine Art series. And it was published back in 1988.
All right.
And what's interesting is it doesn't seem to be your typical art book, right? We've got these drawings by Gold, but then there's also poetry by Iven Lourie and then commentary by Linda Corriveau.
It's like a multimedia exploration.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And speaking of Miro, it sounds like Gold was really, really taken by his early years in Paris, which were pretty rough. Apparently he was living on basically a meal a week, dried figs and chewing gum just to get by.
Yeah, that detail about the sparse diet really stuck with me because I was thinking about that in relation to what, the surrealists were all about, like the whole idea of exploring the subconscious.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, like the world of dreams.
Yeah.
And, deprivation can do some pretty crazy things to your mind.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
And it's no coincidence, right, that Miro's art from that period is full of these bizarre hallucinatory images.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Gold is picking up on that connection, like how Miro's struggles may have, fueled his creative fire in a way.
Yeah, and remember, Gold isn't just like an art enthusiast.
Right.
He's a transformational psychologist.
Yes.
And so that background seems to inform how he interprets and reimagines Miro's work in Miro's Dream.
Okay, so I definitely want to come back to that whole psychology angle in a bit. But first, can we talk about Miro's style for a second?
Yeah.
Because even if you're not an art connoisseur or anything, his stuff is just instantly recognizable.
Oh, absolutely.
Gato.
Yeah, it's so unique. And it's like this mix of the playful and the kind of unsettling too. At the same time, you've got those, stars and moons, these disconnected objects just floating around.
Very dreamlike, yeah.
Very dreamlike. And then you have those figures.
Like the ones with the giant eyes.
Yes.
Or those almost human, almost animal creatures.
Exactly.
It's hard to describe.
They're whimsical, but there's definitely an edge to them too,
Yeah.
And Miro himself actually described his work as being rooted in both tension and tragedy, which I find really fascinating.
So it's there's this darkness lurking beneath the surface of these seemingly childlike images.
Yes.
That's so interesting. It's Gold was drawn to that complexity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And think about this. He spends 25 years creating these drawings.
Wow.
With some dating back as far as 1964, which is, years before the book was even published.
Right.
So clearly it's more than just a quick homage to Miro.
Yeah. He's really stewing on this.
Yes.
And, filtering these influences through his own experiences, right? And then adding his own expertise as a psychologist. I mean, that's a potent mix.
It is a very potent mix, yeah.
All right, so I want to get into the visuals themselves because the descriptions in that text file you sent are wild.
Yeah.
And I'm especially curious about the book cover. What is that like?
Oh, yeah. It's so striking. You have these abstract figures kind of surrounding the title, Miro's Dream, in big, bold red letters. It just sets the mood perfectly, I think.
Yeah, I love that. It's like those figures are beckoning you into this strange, otherworldly realm.
They are.
And then there's that one with that lone figure, almost like a silhouette, right, set against this vast cosmic backdrop.
Yes. That one really struck me, too. It feels so introspective, almost melancholic in a way.
It's funny you say that because the image that jumped out at me was that that creature with the huge grin.
Oh, yeah. I know which one you're talking about.
Almost like a caricature, but also kind of creepy, too,
It's like Gold is playing with that line between humor and the grotesque.
Totally. Okay, and what about the one with the figure sitting at the piano? Because to me, it's this image of pure creative expression.
Yeah, that one's interesting because it brings music into the mix.
Yeah.
You can almost hear the melodies, right, that figure is creating, like pouring their emotions into the keys.
Yeah, it's so evocative. It seems like each of these images is like a window into a different aspect of this dream world that Gold is building.
It is, and it's not just random imagery either. Like,
Hmm.
the book itself is actually structured like a dream.
Hmm.
It starts with Miro collapsing in his Paris flat, hungry, disoriented, and then it's just like plunges him into this bizarre dreamscape.
Yeah, the excerpts like from the book itself in the source you sent, there are some incredible lines.
Oh, yeah.
Like, okay, that line about the bitch with capriolet whiskers running through the dreamer's legs. Talk about vivid imagery.
Oh my gosh. And I had to look up capriolate. It means having tendrils, which makes that image even weirder.
It's so bizarre.
And then there's that one with a ponderous figure just sitting in a river, listening to
Yeah.
clay birds.
Right.
I mean, what does that even mean?
It's like he's taking these like everyday elements and just like twisting them into something so surreal and unsettling.
He is. Yep. And there's that part with the bather playing with the sun as if it's like a beach ball. It's playful, but there's this undercurrent of something like off.
Yes, definitely.
And then let's not forget that cocktail party.
Oh, yes.
The book describes it as definitely not everyone's idea of a cocktail party, which just makes me even more curious about what's going on there.
Like, what does that even mean?
I know, it's like he's daring us to imagine what that party might be like, knowing that it's going to be anything but ordinary.
Right. And then you've got like the giant figure holding a dwarf-like man in her hand and the matador who escapes a raging bull by flying up into the sky. Like every image is just packed with symbolism.
It's like a visual puzzle box where each piece holds a clue to some deeper meaning. It's
Yeah.
really, really fascinating.
Okay, so we've got these like incredible dreamlike images, this bizarre narrative, and then Iven Lourie comes in with his poetry and adds like a whole other dimension to it.
Yeah. And it's not just that he's writing poems, inspired by the art. The source material actually said he wrote them in response to Gold's images.
Oh, wow.
So it's like a conversation,
That's so cool.
a back and forth between these two creative voices.
So instead of just looking at a drawing and being like, huh, I wonder what that means, you've got Laurie's poetry that's giving you like another way to interpret it.
Exactly. And it makes me think about how we experience art in general, right? Like, is there one right way to understand it, or is it more about the dialogue between the art and the viewer?
That's such a good point, and it really makes me want to hear some of these poems. But first, can we take a closer look at how all of this ties into the themes of transformation that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, let's unpack that next. I think that'll be really interesting.
Okay, so we've got this book that is like a visual and poetic dreamscape inspired by Miro and then infused with Gold's psychological insights. But like, where does transformation fit into all of this?
Yeah, that's where it gets really interesting, I think, because Miro's dream isn't presenting transformation as this like neat and tidy process. It's not a self-help manual.
So it's not like follow these 5 easy steps and you'll achieve enlightenment.
No, not at all.
Okay.
It's inviting us to engage with transformation on like a deeper, almost intuitive level. It's about embracing, the surreal, the unexpected, and maybe even the uncomfortable.
Okay, I'm with you so far. But how does that lead to transformation? Like, we get these bizarre images, we get these dream sequences, but I mean, how does that actually lead to, a person changing?
I think sometimes like logic and reason can only take us so far. It's like those moments when you have a dream or you see a piece of art and it just hits you in a way you can't quite explain.
Yeah.
It bypasses your rational mind and it just speaks to something deeper.
I've definitely had those moments, like when you see a painting or something and it just like evokes this really powerful emotion in you, even if you don't know why.
Exactly. And Miro's dream seems to be built on that kind of experience, right?
Yeah.
It's using art and poetry to tap into those deeper levels of ourselves, I think, where transformation actually happens.
Okay, that's starting to click a little bit.
Yeah.
The source mentioned that Gold was inspired by Miro's own transformation through hardship, especially those like difficult early years in Paris.
Yes. And I think that's a really crucial point because, Miro was facing extreme poverty, hunger even.
Right.
But, instead of being crushed by those experiences, he channeled them into his art. He created something beautiful and powerful.
Yeah. So it's almost like saying that, creativity itself can be a form of transformation, like taking pain and turning it into something meaningful.
That's a really, really insightful way to put it. And I think Gold is building on that idea, right?
Hmm.
Like he's suggesting that transformation isn't about avoiding hardship or struggle. It's about facing those challenges head on and finding a way to grow from them.
Okay, I like that. And that brings us back to that dream narrative in the book. It starts with Miro, literally collapsing, from exhaustion and hunger. And then he's swept up in the surreal world with, bizarre guides and fantastical creatures.
Right. And if we view that narrative as like a metaphor, it becomes a really powerful representation, I think, of the journey we all take as we try to understand ourselves and our place in the world.
So it's like we're being invited to, like, walk alongside Miro as he's navigating this really strange dreamscape. He's lost, he's confused, but he keeps moving forward. He encounters these challenges and ultimately, hopefully, transforming.
Right. And remember, Gold is bringing his perspective as a transformational psychologist to this interpretation, right?
Yes.
He's interested in the ways that we can use difficult experiences to unlock our potential and become more whole individuals.
Okay, here's what I don't quite get. Gold's images are often playful, but there's also this, like, sense of the grotesque, the unsettling. How does that contribute to the idea of transformation?
Yeah, and I think that's what makes Gold's approach so unique and I think so effective. Because he's not shying away from the darker, more uncomfortable aspects of human experience. In fact, he's bringing them to the forefront.
Right. It's like, some of those images with the grinning creatures or, the figure holding the dwarf. They're kind of creepy, but you can't look away.
Exactly. And I think that's intentional. He's suggesting that true transformation requires us to acknowledge all parts of ourselves, even the ones that we might want to hide or deny.
So it's about integrating, like, the light and the shadow,
Right.
the playful and the grotesque. It's all part of, who we are.
It's all part of who we are, exactly. And by confronting those shadow elements, we can actually move towards wholeness and integration. It's like that old saying, what you resist persists.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So we've got this, like, incredible visual and narrative journey that Gold is creating, but then there's Iven Lourie's poetry, which is, like, woven throughout the book. How do his words contribute to this whole exploration of transformation?
I think Laurie's poetry does a few really important things. First, it adds another layer of interpretation to Gold's already, complex images. It's like having a guide, kind of whispering in your ear, pointing out details you might have missed, and offering a new perspective on what you're seeing.
Oh, I like that. So it's not just describing the images, it's adding, like, depth and nuance to the experience.
Exactly. But more than that, I think Laurie's poems are tapping into the emotional undercurrents of Gold's work. They're giving voice to the feelings, that these images evoke, even if those feelings are difficult to articulate.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, okay, with that grayscale figure floating in the cosmos, it evokes the sense of isolation, maybe even loneliness.
Yes.
And Laurie's poem could give words to that feeling and make it even more resonant for the reader.
Exactly. And I think that's crucial to the transformative process. By giving language to our emotions, by expressing them through art or poetry, we can begin to understand and integrate them more fully.
Yeah. And it creates this, like, incredible synergy between the visual and the written word. They're working together to kind of guide the reader through this journey of self-discovery.
Yeah, it's like a dance where each partner is leading and following at different times.
Mm.
And it's that dynamic interplay, I think, that makes Miro's dream so compelling.
Yeah, I agree. So far, we've talked a lot about, Miro and Gold, but what about Linda Corriveau, the commentator?
Yeah.
What role does she play in all this?
That's a really interesting question. From what I've gathered, she seems to be providing context and historical grounding.
Okay.
She helps us understand Miro's life and work and how Gold's interpretations fit into that, that larger picture.
So she's kind of like the bridge between, like, the inspiration and the reinterpretation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She provides a really valuable framework, I think, for understanding those artistic and psychological threads that are woven throughout the book.
So it sounds like Miro's dream is a truly collaborative effort.
It is.
With each contributor bringing their own unique perspective and expertise to the table.
Yes.
What stands out to you the most so far?
Honestly, it's the way this book challenges our expectations of what art can be,
Yeah.
It's not just about aesthetics. It's about using images and words to explore, the complexities of human experience,
Yeah.
especially the process of transformation.
I agree. It's like a portal into another world, a world where, the boundaries between art, psychology, and dream logic just, like, blur and dissolve.
They do.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about, the bigger question. If Miro's dream is ultimately about transformation, what kind of transformation does it invite us to undergo
Whoa.
as readers,
That's a big one.
as viewers? Yeah.
What are you thinking? It feels like it's asking us to, like, really look inward, you know, to
Yeah.
confront those parts of ourselves that we might normally, like, shy away
I
from.
think that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's an invitation to embrace the surreal,
Yeah.
to find beauty in the unexpected, even in the things that initially make us kind of uncomfortable.
And to be open to the possibility that, transformation isn't always a straightforward linear process.
Right.
It can be messy, confusing,
Yeah.
even a little bit scary at times.
Absolutely. But also incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
It's like Gold is saying, look, life is full of contradictions, light and shadow, joy and sorrow.
Right.
But it's in those spaces, those in-between places where we really discover who we truly are.
And by embracing those contradictions, we can kind of unlock new ways of seeing and being in the world.
Yeah, I love that. And it's like we're being given permission to kind of break free from the confines of like logic and reason
Yeah.
and tap into that raw, intuitive energy that fuels creativity and personal growth.
I'm also struck by how Miro's dream uses humor to kind of navigate these complex themes.
Right.
It's not all like doom and gloom. There's a lightness, a playfulness that keeps it from feeling too heavy or overwhelming.
Yeah, you're right. That humor is so
Uh,
important.
It's like a breath of fresh air, reminding us not to take ourselves too seriously.
Right.
Even in the midst of, facing our shadows, there's room for laughter and delight.
Yeah, this all makes me wonder about E.J. Gold himself.
Yeah.
The source mentioned some of his other books like The American Book of the Dead, Life in the Labyrinth. It seems like he's always exploring these big, like, existential questions.
Yeah, he's not afraid to kind of delve into the mysteries of, life and death, consciousness, the human psyche.
Right.
And the fact that he's, a transformational psychologist just makes his artistic explorations even more fascinating.
Totally. It's like his art and his psychology are in constant dialogue with each other,
Yeah,
informing and enriching one another.
absolutely. And it makes me curious to know more about, like, his process.
Yeah.
How does he translate those psychological concepts into these visual and poetic forms?
Right. What inspires him? What challenges does he face?
Yeah. It's like we've only just scratched the surface of this, like, incredibly rich and multi-layered world that he's created.
We have.
And it just makes me want to keep exploring,
Yeah.
to delve deeper into his other work and see what other treasures I can uncover.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of those powerful things about Miro's Dream. It's not a book you just read and put away.
Right.
It's an experience that stays with you.
Right.
It sparks curiosity, and it invites you to continue that journey of exploration long after you've finished turning the pages.
So for those of you listening, we've explored the origins of Miro's Dream, delved into its surreal narrative, and unpacked its themes of transformation. But now we want to hear from you.
Yeah, if you were to dream yourself into one of Gold's images, which one would it be?
What calls to you?
What resonates with your own subconscious?
And what do you think Miro's Dream is asking of us, both as individuals and as a society?
Don't forget to check out the show notes for links to purchase the book and learn more about E.J. Gold's work.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see
Yeah.
you next time.